Okay, so here we have the 2019 National 5 conclusion question for Modern Studies. We're going to go over how to tackle this specific question, but the skill here can be applied to any other conclusion question, whether it's a past paper, your prelim, or the final exam. So first thing you'll notice is we have source 1, which is a written source. Source 2, we've got some numerical information in the form of graphs. Source 3, we've got a table with some percentages as well as a wee map. But the thing I would always like you to do whenever you get a question on this is to start here on the back page with the question itself. And you can see here we have 4 bullet points, and it's these bullet points that are very important. We're going to start with them because they let us know what we're actually reading the other sources for. So when we're looking at source 1, what were you reading for? And when we're looking at sources 2 and 3, what kind of stats are we trying to pick out? So this is why it's important you bring 4 highlighters with you when you're attempting a question like this, because we can highlight each of the bullet points an individual colour, and then any information from sources 1, 2 and 3 that corresponds to that bullet point the same colour, and this will help us organise our answers. I'll show you exactly what I mean. And so the first thing I'm going to do is highlight each of these bullet points a different colour. So that's my one for trends in trade membership. Then I'm going to give green for the rate of UK trade union membership. Gender composition will be blue. And then pink for the difference between Scotland and England. Now it's very important we read the bullet points so we know what we're looking for. So let's start with the yellow one, the trades in UK trade union membership. We're looking for a trend, which of course means a pattern over time. So maybe what were trade union membership numbers like in the past compared to now? So that's what we need to go and do. Okay, remember, so we've got a yellow highlighter and we're looking to find trades in trade union membership over time. I would always suggest you start with source 1. The reason for this is because sources 2 and 3 have lots of statistics, which might tell us something about trade union membership as well. I think it's often easier to start with source 1, which tends to be written, because then we can find something in text that matches a statistical source later on. I'll show you what I mean. But for now, if we read source 1, we've got the first sentence which tells us what a trade union is. Our second sentence tells us kind of what they do. But if we have a look at this third sentence, it reads, trade union membership was once as high as 13.2 million in the late 1970s. That might help us establish our trend. So I'm going to highlight that yellow. Now, maybe there's more information. So it might not be all I highlight yellow, but for now, that'll do. Okay. Now, while you're doing this, you might pick up other bits of information, so it's a good idea to keep your highlighters handy. So, for example, I was going to highlight anything about gender composition of trade unions blue, and down here I can kind of see the biggest public sector trade union is called Unison, has 1.3 million members, 80% of whom are female. So I'm going to leave that for now, but I can come back to that later now that I've highlighted it. Okay, let's focus on our trade union membership trends for now, but just be aware it's good to, as you find stuff, just highlight it. It gives you less work to do later on. Now, if I look at source 2, we've got a title, trade union membership in the UK, and it's got millions inside. It's important we read our axes so we know what we're actually reading. We've got millions here, so that must be number of membership, and we've got some dates going across that way. So over time, that's going to help us establish a trend. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this pattern, and I might just with my pen draw a wee arrow to help remind me that the trend is of course going down. Now remember, I never mind you writing on these sheets. I want you writing all over them with these kind of annotations and highlighters and such, especially in your final exam, because all of this will help us when we come to write our answer. If I look at source 2 here, there doesn't seem to be anything about our, specifically about the trend that's not already stated in this first graph, but this male and female thing again might help us later, so I could highlight that blue. Source 3 has some countries, which might help us with our green bullet point 2, and here we've got the rest of the UK, missing Scotland, but that might help us later on with our purple one. So I have nothing else to highlight for the moment. So you can see I've got something about trends here, something about trends here, and now my job is to use that to come to a conclusion and write an answer. Okay, so now I need to write an answer, and I need to do it using the information we've just highlighted. So before I write anything down, I want to think about what that information tells us or shows us. So if we look at source 1, it told us that trade union membership was once as high as 13.2 million. And if we look at source 2, it shows us that trade union membership in 2008 was, well, I'm going to say just over 7 million. It's not exact, but it's roughly right. And then if I look to 2018, it's just over 6 million. So if we look 13.2 million to 7 million to 6 million, I hope we can all agree that trade union membership has declined. Okay, it's gone down. But more than that, if I can do something a little bit clever with these numbers, it was 13.2 million at its high point, and now it's just over 6 million. Well, my maths here is going to be a bit rough, but I'm going to say it is more than halved. And that's a clever thing to say, because this will get counted as an evaluative comment, which will get me my 3rd mark. Let me explain. So I'm going to start by writing just here, and I'm going to start with source 1 states that trade union membership was once as high as 13.2 million. This links to source 2, which shows that in 2008 trade union membership was just over 7 million, but that it has fallen to just over 6 million by 2018. So I've used the statistics now, but I have to still make a conclusion. So I'm going to start my next sentence. So in conclusion, trade union membership has declined by more than half since the late 1970s. And that should get me 3 marks, because what I've done is I've found relevant information from one source, I've linked it to relevant information from a second source, and then I've made a conclusion that is evaluative. Now, if I had written something like, so in conclusion, well, that should really say declined, but trade union membership has declined, and left it there, I'm still correct, but I'm not being evaluative anymore, and thus I would probably only get 2 marks for this answer. So by adding just this little evaluative comment, so in conclusion, trade union membership has declined by more than half since the 1970s, I've done something a little bit more with the information that's going to get me that extra mark. So that should get me 3 marks. And if I can answer each bullet point in this way, so I now have to make a conclusion about the second bullet point, the third bullet point, and the fourth bullet point. If I can do that in the same way that I've done this, I should get 10 out of 10. Repeat this process of highlighting for the rest of the bullet points. My source 1 eventually looks like this. Now you'll see that not everything is highlighted. In fact, very little of it is highlighted. But that's because not everything is totally useful. And that's why highlighting the information and looking at the bullet points first to know what you're reading for is very useful to us. It helps reduce the time we spent reading and interpreting the sources. And of course, it helps us write our answer that bit more quickly. And if I scroll down, you can see I've done the same for source 2. And then for source 3, adding my wee annotations and such to help myself interpret the sources. And that's going to allow me to answer the rest of these bullet points. And once that I've done all my highlighting, I can then use what I've highlighted to come to my conclusions and write my answer. And here you've got a complete answer, just 4 paragraphs. And given that I've taken this from the SQA's own marking instructions, it should be enough to get us 10 out of 10 marks. So if you can do this and apply this skill to any of the other conclusion questions, you yourself should be able to get 10 out of 10 or as close to that as you're able to manage.